Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this IBT Thought Leadership session, which comes as we swiftly approach the announcement of the Union Budget for 2022-23. In this session, we will talk about export-specific initiatives that may be considered by the government in its budget announcements, as well as policy direction going forward when it comes to how the exporters can get a better growth direction and accelerate their integration with the international market. For this discussion, we are pleased to have with us Mr. Pushkar Mukewar, co-founder and CEO of Drip Capital.
Hi, Virat. Hi.
Hi.
Glad to be here.
Pushkar has realized the huge potential of addressing the working capital gap for small businesses in emerging economies. And this was his inspiration behind starting Drip Capital in 2016. Drip, although is a relatively young company, but it has achieved a lot of success in this short span of time. It offers a unique trade financing product, which is targeted towards small businesses that do cross-border trade by making underwriting and financing of international B2B transactions seamless. At Drip, he is responsible for defining the strategic direction and managing the product, business development, and operations of the company. In his 13-year-long career, he has worked across various geographies and has an in-depth understanding of the global financial services industry. Hi, Pushkar, and welcome to this interaction. Pleasure having you here.
Same here. Glad to be here.
So Pushkar, starting off on our discussion, of course, as we have noticed, exports have witnessed a strong resurgence in the past few months. And the government has set a stiff export target of $650 billion for the current fiscal when it comes to products and services together. What do MSMEs in particular expect from Budget 2022, according to you, and so that they can stay more resilient and also take on the challenges which have been very significant over the past year, rising raw material prices, equipment shortage, and even the shipping issue, which the buzz for most of last year?
Yeah. So I would say that, it's been, I think, relatively good over the last maybe 2-3 months or so. I think exports have really started rising. However, I guess MSMEs are still impacted by the whole, the COVID-induced kind of ecosystem changes, right? And to me, I think there are broadly 3 areas where the MSMEs require support for them to sort of continue on this momentum and capitalize on the growth. First one, I think, would be really around raw material, right? I think we've seen that raw material prices have kind of skyrocketed in certain sectors, and a lot of this is to do with MSMEs not having enough visibility into the supply side. I think the government can do more to sort of promote perhaps more visibility into sellers who are providing these raw materials, just so that competition can kind of ensure that raw material prices are controlled. The second area is really freight costs. I know we've spoken about this in the past as well. The shipping crisis is resulting in astronomical rise in freight costs. A container which used to cost about $4,000-$5,000 to US, like a cold container, is now at like $15,000-$20,000, right? And I think as a result, for a lot of the MSMEs, the profit margins are getting squeezed. I think providing support to the MSMEs on the logistics side while this crisis lasts would be pretty critical for these MSMEs to weather this storm, right? The third area I would say would be really around helping them connect with buyers overseas. I think we've seen that the whole COVID situation has resulted in just changes around the global trade ecosystem. I think a lot of companies are starting to look at China plus one strategy. People are looking at alternatives beyond China. Because of the freight costs, also MSMEs, specifically in commodities space, are not exporting goods or not finding it viable to export goods to markets like US, Europe, and in fact need market development support in markets which are closer to India, right? So I think because of all these changing dynamics on the demand side, there is obviously support required by the MSMEs to really help them navigate these changing demand patterns and expand their market presence in geographies which make more sense. Also capitalize on the China plus one trend, which is happening broadly. So. Virat, can't hear you.
Yeah. As per the recent data from the Commerce Ministry, share of MSME exports to India's total exports in value terms continues to hover around 49%. How can the budget help MSMEs improve this share and perform better?
Yeah. So I think there are two or three areas where even the pandemic has highlighted how what we need to do sort of on the MSME side to really become relevant. First one is having MSMEs really get integrated into global supply chain. See, today I think most of the exported products from India tend to be very basic, simple primary products, and are not kind of complex intermediaries of finished goods. And I think any kind of upgradation which the government can help support so that MSMEs are part of the global value chains and are involved in more complex products would just provide more sustainability to the MSME sector, and also perhaps help with increasing the share of MSME sector as part of our total exports. The second area I feel we can do more of is just kind of helping build a brand for Indian products. I think there are certain products which India is known for, or I guess there are sort of unique to India, whether it's at one end like handicrafts or regional coffees, stuff like that. I think we can definitely do more to help the global audience become more aware of these unique products from India, which are also our specialty. I think both these things, just sort of moving up the value chain to more complex products in global value chain, global supply chains, and then also kind of building the brand for more specialized Indian products. I would say these two things would definitely help with increasing the share and just making the MSMEs more sustainable as part of the global trade ecosystem.
Yeah, actually, you're right. There are some products which may not really contribute in value terms, but they do contribute a lot to our brand building because they are uniquely Indian products, as you rightly pointed out. What were the key lessons, according to you, from the pandemic budget, which we call the budget for last year, and what the government should be doing differently this time when it comes to the exporters?
So I would say a few things. I think on the relaxation side, I think the impact of import tariff should be taken into account. There were some certain import tariffs introduced. And the challenge is that it hurts us two ways, right? As soon as you introduce import tariffs on certain products, our trading partners who are probably supplying us the goods, it becomes obviously more difficult for them to work with India or kind of supply their products to India, just given that it increases the eventual landed cost of those products in India. So that impacts trade on the sourcing side. And a lot of our exporters actually import their raw materials. So as a result, if the import cost becomes higher, that also translates to the eventual cost of exports going up, which again impacts our capability or our ability to compete effectively in international markets. So I think that's one area which the government needs to sort of really relax and look at. As far as reforms are concerned, I think MSME inclusion in the PLI scheme would be a welcome reform. The MSMEs are largely outside the ambit of the production-linked incentive scheme, which has been launched by the government and is largely helping bigger firms. So I would say that the budget can look at announcing sort of a PLI-like scheme with an allocation, especially for the MSME sector. And the third one would be, I think there is a great initiative by the government to launch the TREDS platform, which makes it easy for MSMEs to discount their invoices, but I guess integrating TREDS with GST, I think will help further sort of increase the penetration of the TREDS platform and make cash flow issues for MSMEs less pronounced and just make more financing available for MSMEs. So these would be the three areas I would say, which the government can relook at and perhaps optimize based on the last year's budget.
So what do you think the government can do further to ensure that the working capital needs of MSMEs are met better when they are trading,
Yeah.
especially since you work a lot in this area?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things. One is again incentivizing MSME credit, right? I would say that the government has been doing launching schemes to make sure that there's credit access, which goes to the MSMEs. I think the challenge has been that a lot of these schemes are run through traditional financial institutions, which have historically had a notion that SMB or MSME is a higher risk segment. As a result, despite the schemes being launched by the government, that has not really translated into an equivalent flow of credit to the MSMEs, right? In fact, public sector banks are also to some extent exiting the sector and leaving room for NBFCs and fintech players to play a bigger part. But the challenge is that many of these fintech or NBFC players are not within the purview of these schemes which the government is launching to promote credit access to the SME. So doing more on that front would help with easing the credit problem, incentivizing all the players who are targeting the MSME sectors to do more. Second is, I think, the factoring regulation, there was an amendment bill, which was introduced, and I think just implementing that efficiently, I think promoting again NBFCs and all kinds of lenders to be covered under that bill, so that factoring or invoice discounting becomes a more core product, or a more mainstream product for the MSME sector, would be I think the other thing. And third thing which we see in the market always is just financial literacy. I think the biggest challenge in the MSME sector is that while there are alternative forms of credit which are available, many of these MSMEs are just not aware of these alternative forms of credit which they can avail. And as a result, I think, MSMEs still default to going to their traditional banks, despite there being other players who are in the market, who can help solve their credit problems. So anything which the government can do to really promote education with the MSME sector, perhaps I think with the use of technology today, government can also launch a portal which just educates MSMEs on all kinds of financial options which they may look at or they may avail. And backed by the government, I think there is always fair amount of credibility associated with it, right? So I think financial literacy is the third thing, in my view, which the government can do and focus on.
Right. When you talked about the non-traditional channels, of course, fintech is taking a growing role in this area. So what can the trade sector expect as reliefs or reforms to make fintech and non-traditional finance in the fintechs through the fintech sector realistic and practical for them?
Yeah. So I would say one of the biggest challenges which most fintechs or fintech NBFCs face is just the high cost of borrowing. So today, I think the cost of capital for banks is significantly cheaper than for NBFCs or most of the fintech players, right? And because of the high cost of capital, it's very difficult for these fintech NBFCs to be able to offer a low cost alternative or low cost product to the MSMEs. And as a result, like when the fintechs are borrowing at like 12-13%, the lowest cost they can offer to the MSME can't be below like 16, 17, 18%, considering their operations cost and so on and so forth, right? So as a result, while the fintechs are looking to address the MSME gap, they can't really effectively solve for the cost of capital problem unless their costs become lower. So anything the government can do to make credit access easy for these NBFCs and these fintech players will obviously aid with them being able to service the market of the SMB exporters or SMBs in general better. The second thing is that, this is again, one thing which we are seeing in the market is that private sector banks, and in fact, to some extent, public sector banks, in fact, and private sector banks, both are not as much focused on the MSME sector. In fact, also kind of reducing their exposure to MSME sector, which obviously again puts the onus on NBFCs and fintechs to cater to that need. And given the issues around SMEs with limited history, maybe not organized financials, really digital footprint of those MSMEs, the GST data, and so on and so forth can play a big role, right? So whatever the government can do to really make it seamless for these fintechs to operate and be able to service the MSME gap would be again something which will just help ease the credit gap or solve the credit gap credit problem which we see in the industry.
Right. Pushkar, finally, we have seen the environment around us change significantly over the past 2 years. And definitely, while we are looking at traditional sectors, we are also looking at some new sectors where probably India can, capture a larger market share, because we need to be futuristic as well. But
Yeah.
in your view, what sectors are most important right now for India's growth in the coming years? And how can MSMEs be facilitated in these sectors? Because as you also talked about schemes like PLI, where the MSMEs need to be also a part of the government's focus, as you rightly pointed out. So which sectors do you see as critical at the moment?
Yeah. So I think when we look at overall India's export growth, to me, there's like 3 or 4 sectors which can be a focus. One is agro products. I mean, India has been an agro-driven economy, and there are, again, as we also discussed, there are certain agro products which are maybe India-specific, and I think there are a lot of challenges. It's also a sector where a lot of MSMEs currently operate. And the challenges really are around just free market, so that the agro products, there's efficiency in the entire logistics and the market pricing and so forth. Second is also building the brand and market awareness. So a lot of MSMEs which operate in agro sectors or agro commodities, they don't have market access to markets like the US, Europe, and it's lack of knowledge, or perhaps not having the ability to market to these to buyers in these countries. So agro products agriculture has been a key aspect of our economy, and really promoting agro exports and again building the brand around Indian agro commodities or Indian agro products is something which will definitely aid the MSME sector and India's exports in general overall. Second sector is pharmaceutical. Now that's a sector which obviously has been kind of bread and butter as far as exports are concerned. India is one of the largest players in the global pharmaceutical industry. Most of the players which operate in this space are very large players. Like MSMEs are playing a relatively smaller role in this sector. I think the interesting thing or one of the things which happens in this sector is that 80% of the raw materials for pharma actually come from China. And hence, like, the pharma sector is heavily dependent and kind of impacted by what happens in China and so on and so forth. I think so. Really boosting domestic production of raw materials and reducing the reliance on China for the pharma sector would also somewhere bring the MSMEs as part of this value chain, right? So not directly exporting, but building MSMEs who can provide raw materials and the intermediaries to the pharma companies which are eventually exporting would further aid and improve the competitiveness of our pharma sector globally, which I think, anyways, India is known for, but there's opportunity for us to grow that further and reduce reliance on China there, right? Third is engineering goods. Again, I think the production linked incentive scheme announced by the government has enhanced focus on electronic goods, white goods, ancillary equipment. This will perhaps give an additional boost to the sector. As we already discussed, if we include MSMEs as part of the PLI scheme, there will be perhaps better participation of MSMEs and they can contribute to the growth in this sector. And to me, the fourth sector is perhaps chemicals. It has been touted as a sunrise sector in India, and I think the sector has seen strong growth in the last 2 years. Given the world dynamic around China plus one, where there's a real opportunity for Indian chemical exporters to position themselves as an alternative to China, government can do more to again promote this sector, to really understand the challenges of this sector, to help India be known as a clear alternative to China, which is a position we can occupy if we act correctly and we do the right things. So.
Right. That'll be all from our end. Thank you so much, Pushkar, for taking out your time and giving us some very practical suggestions on the export scenario and also what the government can do in its budget and its policy direction going forward to support Indian MSMEs, which are clearly, the one of the key drivers of our exports. Thank you so much, Pushkar. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Virat.
Thank you.